Person is dead after a triple shooting overnight in Lynn, and this morning police are still searching for the gunman.
Boston 25 News reporter Jessica Reyes is at the scene where police are still investigating. Jess. Only on Boston 25 News, an alarming attack caught on camera. A boy is lured from his home by who he thought were his friends. Boston 25 News reporter Evan White is in Weymouth, where the boy's mother says her son had no clue what was about to happen. Heavy flames and clouds of smoke shut down the center of a local town. This is the old vacant R&T furniture building on West Main Street in Northborough. Police warn drivers to avoid the area as firefighters work to douse the flames this evening.
Still in the dark after this week's nor'easter knocked out power in cities and towns all across Massachusetts. And electric companies say it could take the entire weekend to get the power back. Boston 25 News reporter Kelly Sullivan is live in Boxford this morning, where 90% of the town is without power. Kelly. Well, along with tomatoes, cucumbers, and roses, they're growing something pretty special on a Cape Cod farm. It's hope. That's because the majority of the farm's workforce is made up of people with a wide range of disabilities. Boston 25 News anchor Sarah Underwood takes us inside this place that's growing hope. All right, the finishing touches on one of the most famous finish lines in the world. This week, crews painted this stretch of Boylston Street for the 122nd running of the Boston Marathon. 30,000 runners hope to cross that finish line Monday, greeted by hundreds of thousands of spectators out to cheer them on. Well, it's no easy job to keep everyone safe on Patriots Day, but Boston's top cops and first responders say they're ready. Boston 25 News reporter Catherine Burcham takes a look at how security is being stepped up for this year's race. According to the CDC, black mothers in the U.S. die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers. To put that into perspective, black women are 22% more likely to die of heart disease than white women, 71% more likely to die from cervical cancer, but 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. It's really causing a lot of controversy across the country. How does that fit in terms of bringing politics into the sports arena?
Well, I think what we're really talking about is the need for a national discourse around race.
Speaking of soldiers, we know that Pat Tillman's widow came out after a lot of words about kneeling during the anthem and had said not to use what her husband did, his service, leaving the NFL, as part of a negative, I guess, narrative around this issue.
And I think that that's the point, is that we've created a narrative in this country that around African Americans that hasn't been allowed to be written by African Americans.
It was a historic election. 6 women of color seated on the Boston City Council last November. The council elected its first black female president just a month ago. I sat down with these influencers for a frank conversation about sexism, racism, and their vision for the future of the city.
Your districts all elected you all, but there are still sentiments of racism. There are people who are dealing with this every single day. What do you wish that your example would change?
You belong everywhere, right? And you need to go everywhere.
The Worcester County District Attorney is facing a civil lawsuit in connection to an arrest report scandal involving a judge's daughter. Now, Trooper Ryan Scaviewer filed the complaint. In it, he claims that his supervisors and DA Joseph Early conspired to defame him and to unlawfully tamper with a court file. That file had to do with the arrest of Ali Bebo and comments she made that Scaviewer says he was forced to remove from the report. A state report determined no criminal charges would be filed, and Early has previously denied he asked for the report to be redacted. His attorney released a statement saying, quote, "State officials do not conspire by doing their job. We will respond to the complaint in due course in the appropriate forum, which is Suffolk Superior Court." Brookline police say a local landmark was unintentionally damaged. A large sculpture at Lars Anderson Park was damaged earlier this week. One of the large spheres was rolled down a hill. As you can see, it crashed through a fence. No one was hurt. Police say the damage was malicious, and officers continue to investigate how it happened. Accidental alert created moments of panic At a town hall in Milford yesterday, the town's deputy police chief accidentally sent out an emergency message which said active shooter at town hall. The alert showed up on the cell phones of about 40 workers at the building. The deputy chief told us the message went out while he was testing the new alert system and showing town administrators how it worked.
Unfortunately, I selected the active shooter application, and it went out to all employees at Town Hall.
The deputy chief and another officer went to everyone in the building to explain what happened and to make sure they were okay. Well, former First Lady Michelle Obama is discussing her upcoming memoir. The book, titled Becoming, hits stores November 13th. It focuses on the former First Lady's experiences during her 8-year stay in the White House. Speaking to a crowd at the American Library Association's annual conference, Mrs. Obama spoke about how she adjusted to the role of First Lady and the qualities that unite Americans.
You're all just people, you know, with stories to tell. And we're flawed and broken, and there's no miracle in our stories. It's just we're living life trying to do good.
This is the second book Mrs. Obama has released. Her first, American Grown, came out in 2012 and focused on gardening. The federal government is being sued by Planned Parenthood. The organization is accusing the Department of Health and Human Services of making changes to its funding that favor abstinence-only approaches to curbing teen pregnancy. HHS awards grant money to sexual health and education programs. The department announced in April that recipients must clearly communicate that, quote, teen sex is a risk behavior. It said you should approach kids by helping them delay sex or teach sexually active kids to stop. Planned Parenthood says these changes suggest that programs that teach abstinence only will be favored to receive grant funding.
Oh, I love this story. A little 12-year-old girl from Andover is being called a young Einstein this morning after getting some national recognition for her invention to hopefully clean up the world's oceans.
Well, you know, Anna Du is one of 10 finalists for the 3M and Discovery Education Young Scientist Challenge. Now, I spoke with her and got a first-hand look at what could be the next big invention. One guess where Anna wants to go to college. MIT to study marine-related science. She and the other 9 finalists will go on to the final competition at the 3M Innovation Center in St. Paul in October. And good luck to her.
Yeah, you know, we haven't had too many ocean or beach days this year, and I don't think this weekend really just hasn't been.
It is hard to imagine in a country with such advanced medical care that mothers in the United States are dying due to complications in pregnancy and childbirth at higher rates than most other developed countries.
For certain women, that rate is astronomically higher. The CDC says nearly half of all the maternal deaths are preventable.
As Boston 25 News reporter Crystal Haynes shows us, the race is now on to figure out what needs to be done to save those mothers' lives.
Hungry, hungry caterpillar.
For mom of 2, Beverly Guerrero, her kids are her entire life, but giving birth to them could have ended it.
I started having preterm contractions, and I was given a tabernaline injection in order to stop the process of early labor.
Yeah, nice job.
And I didn't feel that the staff fully communicated and helped me to understand.
Beverly says she felt uneasy in her obstetrician's office before.
Her demeanor was like,
Was it dismissive?
Dismissive. That would be the word that I would use. And so at that point is kind of where my relationship kind of changed with her, and I felt, well, maybe I shouldn't share that and just kind of let me just go to the office visits and just let's do the checkup as normal, and I just won't bring any kind of other concerns or to her.
It's becoming a common experience that's putting moms of color like Beverly at risk.
According to the CDC, black mothers in the U.S. die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white mothers. To put that into perspective, black women are 22% more likely to die of heart disease than white women, 71% more likely to die from cervical cancer, but 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes.
High-income, highly educated black women still do more poorly than white women.
Dr. Laura Riley is director of labor and delivery at Mass General Hospital.
I think that in the past it's been easy for people to say, oh, you know, it didn't work out because she didn't get care. You know, that was the barrier. She couldn't get to the appointments. But I think, you know, we need to own it. And that means that for those women who actually get to the hospital, why doesn't it work out well?
Pregnant and new black moms in the U.S. die at about the same rate as women in countries like Mexico and Uzbekistan. Massachusetts is ranked first in access to health care, and mothers are still dying. Doctors like Riley say the federal and state research and money has been focused on babies, not moms. The Boston Public Health Commission tells me infant mortality rates have dropped nearly 4%, but BPHC doesn't even track maternal mortality.
There's been less attention paid to the mother. And I think now we're realizing, gosh, you know, without the mother, there are no more children.
Dr. Riley says while risk factors like heart disease and stress contribute to black maternal mortality rates, healthcare systems need to do better with implicit bias training, staff diversity, and moms need to start asking questions.
This is a very important time in any woman's life to be able to carry life, and so the expectation is just to have that support, that listening ear.
I'm Crystal Haynes, Boston 25 News.
We'll begin with Boston Police Superintendent Chief William Gross, sworn in back in 2014 after 30 years on the job. He became the city's first black police chief.
This is it, and this showcases history.
I stepped into Boston Police headquarters and right into Chief William Gross's office, better known as his museum.
And my #1 mentor, Willis D. Saunders. Tuskegee Airman, became a Boston police officer, rose to the rank of deputy.
Chief Gross's journey from country kid to one of Boston's top cops started on his grandmother's farm in Hillsborough, Maryland.
Pretty much she programmed me because all we would watch is Westerns and cop movies and cop TV shows.
But soon the urban scenes in those cop TV shows became his reality. At 12, he moved to Dorchester to live with his mother and 2 sisters.
And I arrived in Boston in 1975 at the height of forced busing. So it wasn't popular to have that attitude of wanting to be on the police department then.
More than 30 years after he joined the force in 1983, he was sworn in as the first African-American superintendent-in-chief for the Boston Police Department.
I didn't even know if Boston was ready for an African-American chief, but I knew that Boston was moving in the directions that would distance it from its horrid past of racism and exclusion.
Have you ever been the subject of racism on the job?
Absolutely. When I first came on in '83 as a cadet, sometimes you would hear the N-word, and sometimes you would hear Caucasians spoke about in a certain way as well.
The chief dealt with it thinking of his grandmother's advice when he was called the N-word back in grade school in Maryland.
And then she said, baby, you need to tell someone first, because just because of the color of your skin, a lot of people are going to think when you hear something negative, you're going to automatically respond with violence. And you're bigger and better than that, and I taught you better than that. So take a step back. People can change. Views can change, but sometimes those being oppressed have to teach the oppressors.
So when we take that victory away together, we can work on everything else.
It's a lesson the chief says he teaches the young people in the community he works with, the cadets and the officers he mentors, like Officer Dennis Simmons, who died from injuries sustained in the hunt for the suspects in the Boston Marathon bombing. His photo has a prominent place in the museum.
It was one of the toughest days of my career when I'm in the hospital in the emergency room watching him on that table, just hoping for one last breath.
The command staff, the officers that are coming after you, what do you hope that they carry into the future?
Never forget where you came from. And you should have that empathy, sympathy, care, and respect, because we serve the community. It's not the other way around.
Chief Gross has focused a lot of his work with young people in Boston, including Operation Ceasefire, aimed at curbing youth violence.
The pressure to be thin heats up for many people in the summertime, and it's not just women who bear that weight of perfection.
10 million men in America will have an eating disorder at some point in their lives. As Boston 25 News reporter Crystal Haynes explains, social media and athletics often drive those numbers, and researchers found men of color especially are seeing a spike.
So I was 20 years old at the time. It was right before, I remember the time I was living up north, and just this feeling as though I just was not happy, and I ended up trying to kill myself.
Self-conscious about his weight, fearing he would lose a spot in his marching band, one comment from a family member sent Cyrus Webb into a downward spiral.
One of the things that was said to me was, have you tried taking laxatives? And I was like, take laxatives for what? And they said, that'll help you as far as, with the weight issue. I would do fasting, starving myself, going running a lot, sometimes making myself sick. And all because of trying to, be the image that I thought I needed to be, especially, if you were going to be accepted.
The latest numbers show Webb's struggle is increasingly more common among men. According to the National Eating Disorder Association, 1 in 3 people struggling with an eating disorder is male. Black teenagers are 50% more likely than white teenagers to exhibit binging and purging behaviors. But due in large part to cultural bias, they are much less likely to seek treatment for their eating disorder.
Yeah, I think the biggest myth that still exists to this day is that eating disorders is an issue among women.
Harvard researcher Alvin Tran says social media is playing a role in this trend.
These body images tend to be muscular men with little body fat. Kids are seeing these images and internalizing these images as the ideal male body at a very early age.
Trans research found a significant spike in unhealthy eating habits among men of color on dating apps. Athletes are also struggling in greater numbers.
People will assume that if an athlete is performing well, that means they're healthy. And that could be very different from the actual truth of the scenario.
Matt Strandberg is a counselor, dietitian, and strength and conditioning coach with Walden Behavioral Health. He says 33% of male athletes in weight class sports are affected by eating disorders, but there are very few programs in the country that deal specifically with athletes or specifically with men.
People often conceptualize eating disorders as a drive for thinness. And I think it's really important to recognize that eating disorders are part psychiatric illness and part maladaptive coping skill. But for a lot of individuals, it's helping them cope with an uncomfortable thought, feeling, emotion, or sensation.
Cyclist Ben Frederick knows that feeling.
Trying to be, one of very few people that can ride a bike for their living. When that goes away and the world opens up to you, it can feel very out of control.
Ben was a pro-level cyclocross rider and suffered a traumatic brain injury in a crash. He thought his cycling career and life was over.
My brain still really doesn't work that great. I can't control a lot of things in my life, but I can control this feeling that I get if I don't eat.
Soon he realized he needed help with his control over food in addition to his physical injuries.
I ended up having to go to the hospital because my heart rate was so low. Sitting in that hospital, having a heart rate of 30 beats a minute was the rock bottom.
Just shy of 2 weeks into his recovery, he was back on his bike and sharing his story.
With my brain injury, I almost died. Coming here, I almost died. And so just being very grateful to be able to even attempt this thing that I, tried so hard to be the best at.
A study of more than 2,400 people hospitalized for an eating disorder found that 97% also had conditions like depression, PTSD, or anxiety. For more information, you can contact the National Eating Disorders Association. We'll link you to their information on our website at boston25news.com. I'm Crystal Haynes, Boston 25 News.